I'm going to be honest with you right now. What you're about to hear is not the kind of story that gets whispered in DMs or dropped in anonymous group chats. No, this is the kind of story that makes people panic delete posts at 3 a.m. The kind that makes entire organizations go radio silent. The kind that makes powerful people suddenly step away from social media for personal reasons because last night, out of absolutely nowhere, Micky McCoy's wife broke her silence. And what she revealed didn't just expose one person. It cracked open an entire ecosystem of manipulation, backroom alliances, and a loyalty network built on fear, not truth. She didn't come out swinging. She came out with receipts, screenshots, timestamps, statements that don't just hint at misconduct. They obliterate the polished images certain public figures have spent years manufacturing. And the craziest part? The louder she speaks, the quieter the people involved become. No statements, no denials, not even a lazy PR tweet. Why? Because what she uncovered doesn't just put reputations at risk. It threatens to expose the power behind the power. The people who were never supposed to be seen. The moment Micky McCoy's wife opened her mouth, the entire conservative internet felt a shift in the air. And no, I'm not exaggerating. You could literally feel it, that sudden pressure, that heaviness, like when a storm is about to roll and everyone just pretends the sky still looks normal. Except nothing about this situation was normal. Not the silence, not the timing, and definitely not the people involved. Because when a wife comes forward with a story this detailed, this bold, and this dangerous, you already know she's reached the point where fear isn't part of the equation anymore. She wasn't posting for attention. She wasn't posting for sympathy. She was posting because there was no other door left to knock on. And here's the thing people don't understand. When someone stays silent for months of collecting messages, months of trying to handle things privately, months of telling herself, maybe I'm overthinking, maybe it's nothing, when that person finally speaks, they don't come out whispering. They come out with the whole truth strapped to their back like a tactical vest. That's exactly what she did. And the second her first sentence hit the internet, people instantly realized this wasn't drama. This wasn't petty jealousy. This wasn't marriage gossip. This was an explosion timed perfectly, or horribly, depending on who you side with, because what she described wasn't just a woman crossing boundaries with her husband. It wasn't just inappropriate comments or late-night messages or showing up places she shouldn't have been. No, it was a pattern, a method. A behavior so rehearsed that it almost felt strategic, like this wasn't the first time she'd done it, and probably not the second or third. According to the wife, it was months of watching little things turn into bigger things, subtle jokes turn into suggestive comments, coincidental meetings turn into intentional appearances. And the worst part? She wasn't the only one who noticed. People around them saw it too, co-workers, event staff, volunteers. But nobody said a word because the woman at the center of all this wasn't just anyone. She was Erika Kirk, the polished, perfectly packaged conservative sweetheart, someone the movement put on a pedestal so high she probably forgot what the ground even looked like and that pedestal. That's the real problem. Because when you give someone enough image, enough influence, enough proximity to power, they start believing they're untouchable. They start believing the rules apply to everyone but them. And according to the wife, that's exactly how Erika behaved, like she had a shield around her. A shield built out of the organization's reputation, the chief of staff's loyalty, and the public's trust. That combination is dangerous. It creates blind spots. It creates excuses. It creates the perfect conditions for boundaries to be erased without anyone daring to call it out. But the moment the wife tried, the moment she decided, listen, something's off, and this needs to stop, that's when the mask slipped. Instead of apologizing like a normal human being, instead of acknowledging the line being crossed, instead of stepping back, Erika allegedly flipped it. She suddenly became the victim, the one being misunderstood, the one being unfairly targeted, the one whose intentions were pure. And you know how this game goes. When someone powerful plays victim, someone else gets painted as crazy. And guess who that someone was? The wife, the actual spouse. The person who had every right to ask questions. But the story doesn't stop there, because the wife tried to handle it internally. She went to the chief of staff, the person whose job it is to remain neutral, fair, professional. Except according to what she experienced, there was nothing neutral about her response. The chief of staff allegedly shut her down instantly. Not gently, not respectfully, but with the tone of someone who wasn't just defending a colleague, but protecting an investment. And that's when the wife realized she wasn't up against one person. She was up against a system designed to defend Erika no matter what the truth looked like. Think about that for a moment. Imagine gathering your courage to confront the one person creating chaos in your marriage, only to discover they have a whole support network ready to gaslight you into silence. Imagine showing screenshots and timestamps and specific examples, but all you get in return is, "You're overreacting. It's not that serious. You're being emotional." Imagine an entire organization looking at you like you're the problem, all because your inconvenience threatens their image. That is the definition of manipulation. That is the definition of power imbalance. That is the definition of being outnumbered in a room, where you should be heard the most. But here's where the story starts getting unbelievable, the kind of unbelievable that only becomes believable when the person telling it comes with proof. She didn't just suspect Erika's behavior, she documented it. Every text, every timestamp, every message with that tone, the tone that doesn't sound innocent, no matter how you try to interpret it. The kind of messages nobody sends unless they're comfortable pushing the limits. And according to the wife, Erika wasn't just comfortable, she was confident. Confident that nothing would happen to her. Confident that if anything blew up, the chief of staff would spin it. Confident that her image was too important to stain. Confident that she could laugh at the wife's concerns and walk away untouched. Yes, laughed. That's the part that shook everyone. The wife said that when she approached Erika the first time, trying to keep things civil, calm, and private, Erika literally laughed and brushed her off. It's not that serious. Imagine hearing that from the person disrespecting your marriage. Imagine hearing that from someone who's been sending messages to your husband. Imagine hearing that while she stands there protected by position, ego, and the belief that she will never face consequences. That laugh wasn't just dismissive. It was revealing. It showed exactly how Erika viewed the situation. As a joke, not a boundary. As harmless fun, not emotional harm. As something she could get away with because she always had, but she didn't see the twist coming. She didn't see that the wife wasn't dumb. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't losing control. She was preparing, quietly, strategically, patiently, and when the chief of staff tried to shut her down, when the organization closed every door, when people who should have protected the truth protected the wrong person, that's when the wife realized the only place left to go was the internet. And the internet never judges based on titles. The internet judges based on screenshots. And the moment those screenshots began circulating, the moment the wife broke the silence that everyone depended on, everything changed. The pedestal cracked. The silence broke. And for the first time, Erika Kirk wasn't in control of the narrative anymore. The people were. The moment those screenshots hit the timeline, it was over. And I don't mean over in the cute, internet slang way. I mean over in the carefully curated public image collapsing like a cheap stage prop way. Overnight, people who once praised Erika's professionalism were suddenly squinting at their screens, zooming in, replaying old interviews, even digging up old photos to see whether they'd missed the signs. Because nothing spreads faster than a scandal that was never supposed to surface. And nothing gets people more excited than watching someone who acted untouchable finally face a crack in the armor. The wife didn't dump everything at once. That's what made it terrifying. She released enough to shake the ground, but held enough back to make people wonder what else she had. Screenshots with blurred numbers, half of a message, a cropped profile photo, a timestamp with no context. And that made the internet go into forensic mode. People on TikTok started analyzing typography and message spacing. Reddit threads turned into war rooms, with strangers connecting dots that didn't even seem like dots until they were lined up. Twitter spaces formed spontaneously, with hosts screaming, "Y'all aren't ready. This goes deeper than any of us thought." And they weren't wrong, because here's the thing. When one woman speaks up about boundary-crossing behavior, people think it's isolated, just to individuals who got their wires crossed. But when old coworkers start messaging anonymously, when former interns start sending in their own stories, when other wives start saying, "Actually, something similar happened to us," you suddenly realize you're not looking at a moment. You're looking at a pattern, a blueprint, a repeated behavior masked as friendliness, and that's exactly what people began seeing. Erika wasn't just too friendly with Micky. According to what surfaced online, she allegedly had a habit of singling out men in leadership roles, becoming overly involved in their projects, hovering around them at conferences, sliding into their messages under the guise of work updates, showing up to events she wasn't assigned to, and somehow always being at the center of private conversations she shouldn't have been a part of. The internet started pulling up old clips where she stood a little too close, touched an arm a little too long, smiled in a way that made audiences uncomfortable. Once the allegations were in the back of their minds, people started saying, "Wait, was this happening the whole time? And everyone just ignored it?" And that's when it hit. Maybe people didn't ignore it. Maybe people were afraid to open their mouths, because everyone knew she had protection. Not just organizational protection, chief of staff level protection. And let's be honest, when the chief of staff decides someone is off limits, they become more than off limits. They become untouchable. But nothing lasts forever, especially when there's proof, and that's exactly what the wife had. Messages that didn't read like innocent conversations. Messages you cannot wave off as misunderstandings. Messages where context didn't matter because the tone was loud enough to stand alone. Look, anyone can send a friendly emoji. Anyone can send a polite compliment. But when a woman texts a married man at 1:14 a.m. with "Are you still awake?" there's no professional angle to that. When she says, "Don't tell your wife we were talking," she gets uncomfortable. That's not miscommunication. That's intention. That's boundary crossing disguised as banter. What shook people the most wasn't the messages. It was the silence from Erika and TPUSA. Not a denial. Not a "this is out of context." Not even the classic influencer move of "I'm stepping away from my mental health." Nothing. Just radio silence. And internet culture has a rule: silence is louder than guilt. If you're innocent, you scream your innocence. If you're guilty, you wait. And Erika waited and waited. And the longer she waited, the more people believed the wife. But the wife wasn't done, because she didn't just talk about Micky's situation. She talked about other women. Women who DM'd her out of nowhere saying, "I thought I was crazy too." Women who had witnessed inappropriate jokes or strange interactions at events but never said anything because they didn't want to be labeled dramatic or jealous or divisive. Women who saw things but stayed quiet because the soil they stood on wasn't safe. One anonymous message said, "She did the same thing to my husband at the leadership summit." Another said, "I always felt like she treated married men differently." One former staffer claimed, "We all knew, but no one wanted to be the first one to say it, and suddenly." The story wasn't about Erika anymore. It was about the entire environment around her, an ecosystem specifically designed to protect the wrong people and silence the right ones. This is where the chief of staff comes back in, because the wife made it clear when she went to the chief of staff, she wasn't greeted with concern. She wasn't welcomed with empathy. She wasn't offered an investigation. She was dismissed, shut down, told to let it go, and the tone, according to her, wasn't neutral. It was defensive, personal, almost like she wasn't complaining about misconduct. She was inconveniencing them by bringing it up. Internet sleuths started digging into the chief of staff's history, pulling up old decisions, old complaints, old whispers. And what they found wasn't surprising. This wasn't the first time she'd been accused of protecting someone she shouldn't have. Not the first time she overlooked misconduct. Not the first time she placed image above integrity. And if that's true, then Erika wasn't just one woman with connections. She was part of a power structure that shielded her from consequences. As long as she remained useful, this theory exploded. When people began noticing a pattern in her public appearances, Erika was always with influential figures. Front row, backstage, in VIP areas. Always where the cameras could see her. Always where the attention was. And people started asking, why is she everywhere? Why is she at meetings she doesn't belong in? Why is she involved in projects she wasn't assigned to? And once the internet asks a question, it does not stop digging until it finds the bones. Everything reached a boiling point when someone posted a clip from months ago, a clip that passed unnoticed at the time but looked sinister now. It showed Erika standing close to Micky at an event, laughing, leaning in, touching his arm. And someone wrote, "Oh, so this wasn't a what I'm thing. She's been doing this publicly." The comments underneath were wild. "She's bold. She thought she'd never get caught. This explains why the wife snapped. This been happening and we all missed it." And at this point, the wife didn't need to say anything. The internet was doing the talking for her. The screenshots were doing the talking. The silence from Erika was doing the talking. The chief of staff's refusal to address anything was doing the talking. It wasn't a scandal anymore. It was an avalanche. And once an avalanche starts, nobody can stop it. They were invested, obsessed, even. And the scariest part? The story had reached a point where no one needed new screenshots. No one needed another text leak. The internet had already sniffed out the scent of a much bigger problem, and they were running with it like bloodhounds. People started noticing something strange every time the wife posted something new, even something tiny like a cropped message or a vague statement. The internet would explode for hours. But every time Erika or the chief of staff were tagged, mentioned, questioned, or called out, nothing. Absolute silence. A silence so thick and calculated that people began calling it the calm before the cover-up. And trust me, that's not a good look, because everyone knows how PR-trained personalities react when they're blindsided. They come out swinging. They post Bible verses. They post soft selfies in natural lighting talking about healing. They post long paragraphs about miscommunication. They post with their pets. They post anything to distract people from the truth. But Erika didn't post a single pixel. She didn't even hit like on anything. The chief of staff didn't post either, and that, more than anything else, told people exactly what they needed to know. If they weren't hiding something, they would have said so. Meanwhile, people on Reddit were dissecting Erika's past appearance with the enthusiasm of CSI agents. Clips from old Turning Point summits resurfaced. People slowed down footage frame by frame, zooming in on body language, micro-expressions, hand placements, the way Erika stood next to people she shouldn't have been close to. And suddenly, comments that once looked harmless started looking suspicious. A compliment sounded flirtatious. A shoulder touch seemed intentional. A laugh sounded like it carried an entire subtext nobody understood until now. And this wasn't even the wild part, because when old clips resurfaced of Erika hugging or leaning in close to high-profile figures, including one shocking clip of her embracing J.D. Vance, people began connecting dots that maybe shouldn't have been connected, but were connected anyway. The internet isn't a court. The internet is a wildfire. And this wildfire was burning uncontrollably. People began asking if this is how she acted publicly, what was she like behind the scenes? Another user replied, she didn't just cross boundaries, she sprinted past them. It got even worse when former TPUSA volunteers started posting anonymously, saying they had felt uncomfortable around her too. Not because she'd done anything to them, but because they watched how she operated. One wrote, she treated married men like single men. Another wrote, she always made the wives feel invisible. Another said, "We all joked about how she collected favorites. Now, those jokes don't seem funny." This entire time, Erika remained invisible, almost like she'd been told to disappear until things cooled off, but they weren't cooling off, they were boiling over, and then it happened. The moment that pushed this story from scandal to full-blown accountability movement. The wife dropped a voice note, not a recording of Erika, but a recording of her own tears, her own shaking breath, as she described one particular moment she'd never talked about publicly before. A moment where, according to her, Erika allegedly told her, "Your husband is a public figure. He doesn't belong to you the way you think he does." That single sentence hit the internet like a torpedo. People were outraged, sickened, furious, because that wasn't flirtation. That wasn't boundary blurring. That wasn't professional misconduct. That was psychological warfare. That was a woman telling another woman, "I can take your husband if I want." And the internet, especially the women, took that personally. Thousands of comments poured in instantly. Women saying they've met people like Erika, women saying they've been dismissed by organizations when raising concerns, women saying they know exactly how it feels to be gaslighted by an entire system that protects the wrong person. And suddenly, what started as Micky McCoy's wife defending her marriage became something bigger, something people felt in their bones. This wasn't just about Erika. This wasn't just about TPUSA. This wasn't just about one bad interaction. This was about how easily powerful women can weaponize victimhood. How organizations sometimes protect the charismatic troublemakers instead of the actual victims. How wives are dismissed as jealous even when they have receipts. How institutions hide the truth to protect the brand. People started calling it the conservative meta-nobody. Wanted to talk about, and that's when the wife dropped the real bombshell. She revealed she wasn't the only one with evidence. Other women who stayed silent for months, even years, had come forward privately. She didn't show their messages, but she mentioned the number. And when she said it, the internet froze. 12. There were 12 women who sent her messages. Not 12 rumors. Not 12 screenshots. 12 actual women who felt boundaries were crossed in some way, emotionally, verbally, socially, and didn't speak up because they knew they'd be shut down. This wasn't a pattern anymore. This was a system where certain behaviors were ignored because calling them out would be bad. Optics, a system where certain individuals were protected because they brought value, a system where an entire staff could witness questionable behavior but pretend it was nothing, and this is where people began questioning the real reason behind the chief of staff's loyalty. Because it wasn't just protective, it was personal. Too personal. Some speculated shared business ties. Others pointed to political partnerships. Some even whispered about internal agreements or mutual leverage. Nothing proven, but the theories spread like gasoline. And then came the clip. One user posted a slow-motion video from a political event months earlier. The camera wasn't focused on Erika, it was focused on the chief of staff. And in the background, you could clearly see Erika whispering something into her ear. The chief of staff looked uncomfortable, then frustrated, then annoyed. And then she nodded, that stiff, reluctant nod people give when they know they're agreeing to something they don't actually want to deal with, someone commented. That nod tells you everything, someone else replied. They were planning the cover-up months ago. Whether that was true or not didn't matter, it felt true. And that's the most dangerous kind of truth, because once the public feels something is real, the damage is already done. It doesn't matter how many statements you release after. It doesn't matter how many PR experts you hire. It doesn't matter how much you deny. The court of public opinion had already decided the wife wasn't dramatic. She wasn't overreacting. She wasn't jealous. She wasn't insecure. She was right. And the silence from Erika? The silence from TPUSA? The silence from the chief of staff? That silence condemned them louder than any screenshot ever could. And now we're here, standing at the edge of a story that is still unfolding, still mutating, still shaking people who thought they were safe behind titles, reputations, and carefully crafted public personas. Because if this entire saga has proven anything, It's that silence does not protect the truth. It only protects the people who want to bury it. And those days? They're numbered. We still don't know what Erika is going to say. If she ever does, we don't know if TPUSA will finally step out of the shadows and address their critics. We don't know if the Chief of Staff will hide behind procedure or finally admit the decisions she made behind closed doors. But the real question, the one haunting everyone, is this. Will the truth come out because they chose to reveal it, or because the internet forces them to? Because right now, the internet isn't backing down. Not after the messages. Not after the anonymous accounts. Not after the timeline of behavior that suddenly makes sense in hindsight. People have seen too much. Too many cracks. Too many coincidences that no longer feel like coincidences. So I'm going to ask you, the viewer, the only question that really matters now. What do you think happens next? Does Erika rebuild her image? Does TPUSA protect her again? Does the Chief of Staff finally break her silence? Or is this one of those scandals that only gets darker the deeper you dig? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, this story is not finished. And if you want the next update the second it breaks, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this was just the surface. The real story, the one nobody is ready for, is coming next. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.